Hey, Facebook. We are now live. I'm getting Instagram set up here. See if we're good to go. Switch that around. There we go. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Wednesday workshop. I am Sarah Webb. It's good to see you all. As you sign in and tune in, be sure to say hello. Tell me your name. Tell me where you're tuning in from. I'm really excited about this episode. For those of you who've been looking at my previews, I have a very special guest that I'm going to announce in just a second. But first, I want to give you some announcements. The Colorism Healing book launch is Friday, the 26th at noon Central Standard Time. That is always my favorite event of the year. I'm going to have 16 or 17 different authors on, reading their works on colorism, talking about their experiences with colorism, what we can do about it, solutions to it. So we'll have diverse perspectives related to that. The Colorism Project, stopping to say hi, have a call soon. Thank you for stopping. We'll have to talk soon. I will text you back about getting on a call tomorrow as well. Hey, Fly Magpie, good to see you again. Coastal Flower, LaCarcia 007, Sienna. Hey, Sienna, welcome. Stephanie, hey, Stephanie. Yes, I did have a good birthday. My birthday was on Saturday, and I enjoyed a low-key time here in Texas with the family. So for those of you who are just tuning in, be sure you say hello, tell me your name and where you're tuning in from. I was just announcing the book launch on Friday, June 26th. Now, the important thing about the book launch is that you should RSVP on the Facebook event page, right? Because I'm going to be doing live giveaways, but in order to win one of the giveaway gifts, you'll have to answer a trivia question. So we're going to have some intermittent trivia questions. And all the information you need is going to be on the Facebook event page, right? So I'll be asking you things about when did I launch the first contest? I might be asking you things like who designed the cover for this year's book, right? So all those kinds of trivia details about Colorism Healing and the writing contest, I'll post periodically between now and the book launch, right? So if you haven't RSVP'd on the Facebook event page for Friday, June 26th, please do. We'll also be doing a live Q&A where you can answer questions in real time, or you can send questions in advance. Welcome, all these awesome folks on Instagram. Annie Gerard, Barbara Felix, artist, San Antonio, Texas. Hey, Barbara. We love artists. What kind of art do you do? Painting, sculptures, a little bit of mixed media. Hey, D1. I see Aaliyah. Let's see. Aaliyah A. Amon. I'm sorry, I'm butchering your screen names. But we're going to jump in on our topic on allyship and privilege and colorism, right? So as we are getting into the topic, I want you to think about your own definitions of those things. So without further ado, one of my favorite people in the whole world, my special guest, Dr. Jandel Crutchfield, aka my big sister.
Hey, Facebook and Instagram. I'm so honored to be here.
There she is. My twin spirit. Welcome, Dr. Crutchfield. Thank you so much for being my first, my second in-person guest. Yeah. My first online guests were actually your children. My niece and nephew. So a lot of people watching know me, and I also introduced myself at the opening. So let's take a few seconds for you to tell the audience about who you are and what you do.
All right. Well, I'm Jandel Crutchfield. Right now I'm an assistant professor of social work. I'm in my second year at the School of Social Work at the University of Texas at Arlington. And so I teach about school social work and about diverse populations. And so I study how people who are in helping professions or in the teaching profession, social work, how they can inadvertently use or have implicit bias, racial bias or skin color bias, and how that impacts students and clients. And so Dr. Webb, Sarah, and I have actually done a lot of research together and presentations together. So just trying to improve the lived experiences of people of color as they're dealing with bias and racism. And it sounds like the whole world right now is speaking out about that very same thing.
Absolutely.
So I'm a mom of two. My kids were on before. JC is 8 years old. Hey, JC. And Malika is 6. And I'm married to Jonathan Crutchfield, who also is in the education field as well. And we've just been happy to have Aunt Sarah visit in this summer.
Yay. All right. So Jandel and I are sisters. And we have the same mother and the same father, right? So we are sisters through and through, but we have very different, well, not very different. We look alike in terms of our features, but our skin tone, our hair textures, and our eye colors are different, and they have been our entire lives. Hey, Teresa, thank you for tuning in on Facebook. Welcome, folks. So that has shaped, would you say, a lot of the reason why we do work on colorism, and it's colorism in particular, but also just like racial justice and things like that. So with all that's currently going on, right, with the death of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and all those before and recently, a lot of people are asking what they can do, right? Particularly non-Black people. So that includes white people, but that also includes other people of color who don't identify as Black, right? They've been wanting to know how they can support Black people, how they can be allies for Black people in this movement. So there's been a lot of discussions about allyship, what that means, what that looks like, right? And Janelle and I talk a lot about allyship amongst Black people, right? In terms of colorism, with her being lighter skinned. And I've gotten messages and comments from light-skinned Black women usually who are asking me what could they do as lighter skinned sisters to support those of us who have darker skin, right? And so I thought that that would be a great topic for us to do while I'm in town, where we could sit down together. But part of the allyship question, though, I think stems from identifying privileges, right? And so we want to talk about what is privilege, right? Those of you who might have some ideas about how you define it, please let us know in the comments. And while you all are typing in your comments, I'm going to ask Dr. Crutchfield to chime in and kind of give us your perspective on privilege. What does it mean? How do we identify it?
Yeah, so I think of privilege for anyone as an unearned benefit. And so sometimes there's unearned things that have negative outcomes, but a privilege is something that you didn't earn. And when we're talking about individuals as humans, something you're born with, right? And so the color of your skin is potentially, and we're talking about colorism, a benefit. And so in the scheme of white supremacy and whiter being better, the lighter your skin, the more European your facial features, you earn a privilege that is akin to white privilege. And so if there are different tiers of how society treats people, the lighter your skin is and the more European your features look, you're a step above those who have darker skin or more African looking features, right? So Black features. And so privilege then might appear in you being given certain job opportunities as compared to those who are darker skinned, you avoiding certain penalties, right? So in class where you do something wrong, the teacher might overlook it, as opposed to your darker skinned brother or sister, like literally brother or sister that does something in class. And so really anywhere that you see racial disparities, and I think race is what the conversation is globally. So even in policing, even in criminal justice, anywhere there's a racial disparity, you also see a skin color disparity where lighter is typically privileged.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. Mm-hmm. So thumbs up if you're still with us and that makes sense to you. Question marks if we need to clarify or repeat ourselves at any time. But I'm going to ask a follow-up question, Dr. Crutchfield. But what would you say to someone who's like, but I have a hard time, you know, even as a lighter skinned Black person, I still have a lot of struggles. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I think there are differences. And so white privilege is the privilege that we are most familiar with. And so the way I explained it in terms of white privilege is that you individually or interpersonally may not get to experience all of those benefits, but there's still a system of benefits. And it's really good to talk about this right now because people are hearing that word a lot: systemic, systemic, systemic. And so as a lighter skinned Black person or person of color, Latina, you may be saying, well, I'm still oppressed as a Black person, but there's still a system though that does privilege your skin. If you individually haven't experienced it, it's kind of like the Band-Aid test, right? So I may not have all that I want as a white person or a lighter person. I can go in typically and find a Band-Aid that is my skin color. And the more often you can do that, that speaks to a system globally, commercially, educationally, again, in the criminal justice reform that privileges lighter skin over darker skin. So there are interpersonal issues that are very real that you may have experienced, but those are typically kind of a manifestation of what's just happening in the larger system that privileges lighter.
Yes. So I just want to shout out Keisha, who's watching. Recently met her online, but we happen to live in the same town. And she says, my whole family is listening to this amazing information. Thank you. Priscilla just joined. Hey, Priscilla. Flag Magpie and D1, give us thumbs up, right? I also want to, in talking about privilege, I want to point out the fact that everyone has some form of it. Right. And so I think part of the conversation today is we're all asking you to identify where you might be privileged. Right. And you might not have the big privileges of race or gender, but maybe if you're a U.S. citizen, you have privilege in comparison to someone who's a new immigrant. Right. And so all of us can have some form of privilege, even though we experience hardships.
Right.
Yeah. And I also often use being a thinner person, right? So I'm dark skinned, but I've never been plus sized. And so I can go into a store and know that they're always going to have a size 8, right? Or a size 10. And so that's a form of privilege, is I never have to have that fear or anxiety when I go shopping for clothes. And that's something that we can acknowledge. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to keep it moving. Feel free to drop in questions or comments or commentary, because I know a lot of you think about these things yourself and you've been learning a lot. Say that again?
I said, what do they think privilege is?
Yes. And what do you think privilege is? Has there been a moment in your life where you realized you had privilege that you didn't realize before, right? So some people might not be aware of their privilege until something happens, right? So have you had a turning point where you were able to identify privilege that had previously gone unnoticed, right? So we are interested in seeing how you all perceive these things, right? And so directly related to privilege is allyship. We've been throwing that word around a lot lately too, right? Particularly like being a white ally or being an ally to Black people during this Black Lives Matter movement. And so how do you all define allyship? But also I'm going to pose that question to Dr. Crutchfield. How do you define allyship?
I define allyship as a willingness to put your body in for somebody that you agree with, right? And so if I agree that there is a struggle, a global struggle against colorism, I'm willing to put my body, which means some of the privilege I have, the time, the willingness to do research, the effort into that struggle, to fighting against that struggle. And so it's no different, if I align myself with somebody that's trying to lose some weight, if I have the ability to provide you with a meal that will help you, if I have an ability to, do some of the working out with you, although I may tired, I may do a 5 a.m. workout with you. I'm going to do all of those things because I'm allied with your goal. And so if your goal is just to be recognized for your humanity, then you're often not recognized for that humanity because you have darker skin and the issue of colorism, race. If you're a Black person, then I'm going to use my voice, my body, my time, my talents to try to get that point across to others.
Absolutely. And we also have some great comments on Instagram as well. We have Leah N. Sorry. I think ally is something you do. Allyship is a verb, not a noun. So thank you, Leah, for giving us that tip on allyship. It's something you do, right? Action has to be behind it. You can't just say you're an ally. You have to live it. Don't just talk about it, be about it, okay? And then I Digress X says, allyship is a willingness to sacrifice your comfort for others' struggle. And I love the word sacrifice, and I love the word comfort, right? Because sometimes people want to do what's comfortable and call themselves allies, right? But I think true allyship means you're going to get uncomfortable. You're going to be risking something, right? You might risk, reputation or status. You might risk losing clients if you're a business. You might risk losing followers on social media, right? So what are you putting up in terms as collateral, right? In order to progress and further the struggle of others. We have another comment from Flag Magpie. You want to read that one?
Yeah, it says, yes, my privilege and passing ability has literally depended on context and the opinions of the white people around me. 2 specific examples I can think of.
Yes.
Right.
So I think passing ability, for those who don't know, is when a person of color, for a Black person example, can pass as another race, right? Especially if they can pass as white, right? So that's what passing means. And so Flag Magpie is saying that privilege can be contextual, right? So you might have privilege in one room and not have that privilege in another room. Let me repeat. You can have privilege in one context, and then that same thing can be a liability in another context, right? Especially if you're talking about something like color. And things like skin tone are so relative. So in one setting, you could be the lightest person in the room, and then you go to a different situation and you will be the darkest person in the room, right? And so I do hear a lot of people who are kind of a mid-tone brown color say they experience that, right? They have this whiplash from suddenly being the lightest person and getting all the attention or all the, praise, to being the darkest and being excluded from other groups, right?
Right. Jacqueline on Facebook says all of this.
Yes, Jackie. Thank you for watching. Love it. Miss Tynes. Hey, Miss Tynes, y'all. I did a live with Miss Tynes, so check her Instagram page for some of her lives, including the one I did with her. She says, you, my sisters, was talking about passing on my show past Sunday. See, exactly. So definitely go back and check that out. And then Fly Magpie says, yes. So we're going to get a little personal. And I want to know, Jandel, growing up as my sister, if there were any specific instances in which you recognized differential treatment, or if you recall any specific instances where you had to step up and speak out or be an ally for me or our brother who was also darker skinned.
Yes, I like telling these stories. I still tell these stories to my kids. Because they're enraging. And so I wanted to point that out about being an ally as well, is that if you're not as equally enraged or upset about discrimination, you need to check that allyship and see if you're really an ally, or if it's just when you put on your dress of convenience of allyship or take it off, and put it aside. So I'll never forget, I think you were in kindergarten.
Okay.
And I might have been then in 2nd grade. But we were at a daycare center, and one of your little white kindergarten friends, she might have been, I don't know if she was fully or completely white, but she wanted to play with me, but she wanted to exclude you. And so I was like, well, I'm not understanding why we can't all play together. She was like, well, you know what, you're white and your sister is not. And so I was just like, no, that's not correct. Me and my sister are the same. And so what do y'all think my next words were? If you can't play with my sister, you can't play with me. And so that's important in terms of allyship, because some sisters, some brothers would be like, okay, Sarah, you can't play because I got a friend, or your friend wants to play with me and not you. And making that difference. And so I've always had that, if what's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? So me and my sister are the same. My brother, and this is not necessarily specific to colorism, but we know that the brunt of punishment, discipline, goes towards darker skinned boys. And my brother is darker skinned. And so at the same daycare, something's wrong with this daycare center, obviously.
Yes.
He was riding down the slide, and a little white boy got in front of him. but the teacher punished my brother. And so, I was kind of just in this activist state, telling my brother that you're not going to sit down there and let the lady punish you. And so I wasn't talking to a child. I was actually talking to the adult who punished him, saying, "Get up, Anthony, you better get up. You didn't do nothing wrong." Right. And so that was always my perspective on, when something wrong is happening to my sister or brother. I have to be the one to step in and to say something. And so I did notice differences in terms of how they were the ones punished, or, how a friend wanted to necessarily be closer to me than to them. And I'm like, well, you in kindergarten, you're supposed to be my sister's friend anyway. So I checked all of those kind of things growing up. And then again, I think Sarah's talked about this before, but just the beauty standard or setting being given to me a lot of times and not necessarily to Sarah, who, we went to the same beauty shop, got the same style of hair. We shared a lot of the same clothes. We still do. So what is the difference there besides, our hair texture, like Sarah said, our eye color, our skin color. And so that was evident, all throughout our childhood.
Yeah, and I remember that instance. The girl's name was Nicole, I think, and I don't know if I should say that, but they got a lot of Nicoles in the world, okay? But yeah, and so I remember her saying, that's why I like your sister better than you because she's white and you're black. Now, and my sister doesn't look white, and she never did. She's been considered mixed before, or like mistaken as being biracial before, but never white. So that just, I think, indicates too when people say kids don't see color, or kids don't know, or kids are too young. She was in kindergarten, and she was already not only noticing the difference in color, she was also assigning value and worth to the respective colors. Okay. So don't assume that your kids, however young, are just innocent or, et cetera. So we're going to read some comments that have popped up. I think Fly Magpie popped up first. She says, my first fight at school was defending my sister, who was told by a white schoolmate that she and I weren't siblings and that I must be adopted because my skin once was as light as hers.
Yes.
Child, Flag Magpie. If that ain't our story, I don't know what is.
Y'all had the same dad and the same mom. Yeah, we do.
Right.
It's okay.
And then my mom is closer to my sister's skin tone too. So if we're the three of us are out together, it's always I'm the cousin, maybe the friend, but are like even at the protest, someone's like, so you're a friend of Jendel's? And I was like, no, it's my sister.
Like not just sister as in community.
Right.
Yep. So Stephanie asked, did you learn that from your parents or kind of just inherited this trait to stand up for your siblings? I think it was reinforced, by my mom in terms of saying, we all love each other. And so that was my understanding of love, right? Is that I can't see you sitting out as a child, not being able to play, but now as an adult as well, I also can't see you sitting out of economic opportunity. I can't see you out of, what beauty standards are. I can't see you out of the TV shows in Hollywood. And so that same feeling keeps recurring in terms of, you're my sister, you're my brother. And so, lots of siblings have that. I think is Tupac that says, right, we might fight amongst each other, but I promise you this, we'll burn something down, if you mess with us, in other words, right? So I think both, right? Encourage, but also that, this is our house, this is our family, and we're going to stand up for it. So Jackie says that does go to show how racism is taught. Yeah. And then they watch what their parents do and emulate that consciously and unconsciously, right?
Absolutely. And then Fly Magpie on Instagram says, I went fist to cuffs, LOL. Okay. Go to blows. And I think for me, like as a darker skinned sister growing up with a lighter skinned sister who was actually an ally, and I said this on a previous live, right, that I was fortunate that my sister did not align with the colorism, that she did not accept the extra attention. She didn't accept the extra privileges. Like she did stand up for me, right? And so that influenced how I perceive lighter skinned women, right? Mm-hmm. And so we talk about the conflicts and the clashing that often happens between darker skinned women and lighter skinned women. And I think one way to heal that is through allyship, right? Because we know that society degrades darker skinned women. We know that our own people are demeaning of darker skin and blacker features and kinkier hair, right? And so when it establishes trust, and it establishes trust, right? When we see as darker skinned women that our lighter skinned sisters are not going to accept that system, even if they are benefiting from it, right?
And I think right now we're telling white people who are trying to be anti-racist about those difficult conversations, and in the Black community in particular, probably in lots of communities of color, we have to be the ones, if you're going to be a lighter skinned ally, and you have to be the one to call out somebody that's making a joke about darker skin, like, ooh, you so this, I couldn't even see you. Instead of laughing at that around the dinner table, or ha, 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 you better stay out of the sun because you're going to get too Black. We have to be the ones like, what do you mean by that? And let everybody question. And of course, you're the one that's taking the brunt of that as an ally, so that it's not always your darker skinned sisters or brothers that have to be the ones speaking up to say this is wrong or that's wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So let me know let us know in the comments, like, if y'all have seen a good instance of allyship in your own lives, right? Because we want to get to specific things that people can do, take home, because, I always have homework for y'all, right? Specific things that people can do for allyship, right? So what's one good instance of allyship that you have done, or that someone has done for you, or that you've observed someone else do, right? And in the meantime, we have a new comment. You can read that one.
So Fly Magpie says, that's so interesting because now as adults, my sisters and I have a lot of pain around our color, skin differences, and hair texture and eye color differences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's definitely something to keep working through, and again, allyship, you really can't take it off and then put it on. You have to be in the fight and really feel what your siblings are feeling. My lighter sister seems to think I can't have my reality and she can't have hers. So not sure necessarily what you mean by that, but definitely families have to, work through things and struggle through some things. But definitely lifting up the humanity of sisters that are brothers, who've been ostracized sometimes by society for just being themselves is part of allyship.
Yes. And I think the ability to see from someone else's perspective, right? It's the same thing that we are asking white people to do. It's the same thing we're asking other people of color to do, non-Black people to do, is to be able to say, you might not ever really know what I'm going through, but that is not a reason why you can't stand up and be an ally, right? So I don't have to have felt your pain to know that I can be a sister or a friend or an ally in a situation, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think too often we wait to really understand, or we wait to feel the same way, or to, before we step up and do something. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that that's necessary, right? So my sister, my mom, for example, may never know what it's like to be me, to be in my skin, right? Mm-hmm. But they can still act anyway, right?
Right. So Stephanie Jackson says, I've noticed on Facebook, one particular white person has basically called out her peers on being racist. If you talk or say certain things, basically educating her people to do better. And that's what we mean by allyship, right? So she's probably risking more in terms of her white friends that are racist or that feel a certain way. So risking being ostracized, losing friends, etc. by doing that. But she's taking it upon herself to do that. Right. So she's not necessarily saying, oh, I don't know what to do. And it's kind of like, if we don't know what to do, it's called google.com. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, again, I, as a lighter skinned person, can try to do my own research to figure out what it is I can do. It's not always Sarah's job to say, well, what can I do for you? Not to say that you don't support. And I think that's a lot of well-meaning people saying that. But that's also allyship, is let me get myself out there, figure out what I need to do and do it.
Yeah. So we're going to start introducing the homework, but we're still looking for your instances of allyship, things that have worked for you in the past, things that didn't work, even things to avoid when it comes to allyship. We all know that performative allyship is a thing, right? Where you're just doing allyship that's easy and that actually makes you look good, right? That actually comes out to be a benefit for you in some way, right?
Right.
Because what we want to do for homework is for you to identify that area where you are more privileged than someone else, a friend or a family member, and to use one of the specific strategies to be an ally for them, right? So again, for me, like I might have friends who are not US citizens, right? Or I might have friends whose English is a second language, or friends who have a disability, or friends in the LGBTQIA plus community, right? All these different areas where even though one of my issues is colorism, right? There are other things that I haven't struggled with. So I can still step up and be an ally in other areas.
Yeah, and I'd say too, and I think Sarah's talked about this on some of her other lives, is as an ally with privilege, you're also trying to promote the humanity of those who are experiencing discrimination. And so that begins, again, within your own family, within your own home. And so a lot goes back to what I do with my children. And so promoting darker skinned women and men as intelligent, as beautiful, as people to be desired. Do I have any friends that are darker skinned? Yes, I do. And who am I spending time with? It's one thing to say, darker skin, everybody's beautiful. But if you never are commenting on that, or you never have those people in your presence, then children and other people also, believe in a different kind of system. So I digress says white allies taking front line between police at a protest. Exactly. Cis folks standing against normative statements, right? And challenging of pronouns made in the workplace, right? Fly Magpie says maybe to focus on the feelings of the person being oppressed rather than the way the oppressor tries to spin it when you speak up. Yeah, so the feelings and the voices of the oppressed as an ally, definitely. And making space for them, right? So if I'm a lighter skinned Black woman, I know that I'm overrepresented in a lot of fields, and my field's in academia. So if I'm going to have grant money to hire a postdoc, or I'm going to be able to, and be engaged in the hiring process, specifically saying, well, we need more representation of darker skinned faculty members because Black people look lots of different ways. And so there's a lot less representation of darker skinned people there. So making space if you have that privilege, not always having to say, well, I want to be at the table, I'm a representative of a Black person, but making sure all types of Black people are represented.
Yeah, and I digress. The white people putting their physical bodies in between police officers and protesters, so that when police officers start using their batons, when they start charging the protesters, white people know, A, that's less likely to happen if it's a line of white people at the front, but B, if it does happen, then their Black friends and POC friends don't have to bear the brunt of that physical violence yet again, right? And so I agree with your other examples too about, speaking up for normative standards and pronoun usage at work. And then Fly Magpie saying that considering the feelings of the oppressed person, rather than the way the oppressor tries to spin it when you speak up. I also wanted to point out that, especially when it comes to colorism, right? This is not as much discussed when we talk about white people being allies to people of color and to Black people. But when it comes to colorism, like Janelle was saying, and like I said at the beginning, I do get a lot of messages from light-skinned people, from biracial people who want to know how to be allies and that kind of thing. But also at the same time, acknowledging that they have pain, right? And I think Fly Magpie was saying that her lighter skinned sister has her own story, her own experience when it comes to colorism, right? And I acknowledge that is often a painful interpersonal experience. And so that's why I have Colorism Healing in my title. So I think light skinned women do need to heal, right? So that they then can focus on how to be an ally and how to dismantle the system that does privilege them, right? And I think part of not acknowledging their privilege as lighter skinned women is because they haven't healed from the interpersonal trauma that they might have had themselves, right? And so I think acknowledging that what light-skinned women do go through as a result of colorism means that you should be equally invested in undoing the system of colorism, right? So if colorism is hurting you, however it's hurting you, then invest your time and energy into undoing that system, right? Rather than denying the system.
Right. And I think Two, a lot of some of the pushback is against the system, right? And so we often think if we replace a person, then that'll help, but it's really a system. And so if there are interpersonal issues between you and a person, remember it's a system that privileges lighter versus darker. And I really, having been someone who's an advocate against, that has really shielded me from a lot of that pain interpersonally, because I think darker skinned men and women have seen me as an ally from childhood, right? Like my sister has been talking about. And so making sure that we're not acquiescing to and taking advantage of privilege, but actually standing up to push back against it. So Digress was saying yes to supporting more people of color, women in STEM fields too, right? So wherever you're holding the space, if you have the privilege to be able to make way for others. That is a word. Yes, exactly. But strategies is kind of what we were thinking about. And so again, the active allyship, the doing, and not just saying, the bringing humanity to those populations of people who are oppressed. And in this case, darker skinned women, who do you lift up as beautiful, as somebody worthy of friendship, as somebody worthy of, having a certain position. I think those things are actual strategies to be able to use. Having people over for dinner that don't look like you necessarily, that are from a darker skinned group when it comes to colorism or in other ways of oppression, those particular people. It's one thing to hold up a sign for somebody. It's another thing to bring them and invite them into your lives.
That's some tea right there. I was also going to say, in terms of colorism and white privilege too, is like educating your own people. So that was one of the comments that someone brought up, right? And I've also seen a couple of biracial activists talk about the need for biracial people to come together and say, okay, what can we do, right, as a people, right? They've said, I need to talk to my own people, right? And not always put it on, Black people or darker skinned Black people to educate you, right? Just like white people can educate each other and read the books that are already written. I think, just like, so on Twitter, there's this light skinned group that comes together to talk about their issues as light skinned people. Unfortunately, it also includes some bashing of dark skinned people, right? So in talking about the healing that I mentioned that a lot of light skinned women need, go to other light-skinned women and get that healing, right? As light-skinned women, tell your story in a group of light-skinned women or light-skinned men, right? Talk about how painful it is to, be ostracized or alienated, right? Rather than going to a conversation where a dark-skinned woman is sharing her story and then making your story the center of the conversation.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I'd also just caution, because as Black people, we experience racism. It's the privilege idea is really a hard concept to get. But think about the level of anger we've had for people condemning protesters for speaking up against oppression, right? And so I don't know who the person is who said you cannot tell the oppressed how to speak up, right? Or how to fight against that oppression.
Yeah.
So as light-skinned women, we can't then say, well, you know what, now's not the time to talk about colorism, or, well, think about me, or whatever else is happening, for our darker skinned brothers and sisters that are experiencing literal oppression. We need to be able to create space for their voices in terms of what's happening in the system that they have to face.
All right, y'all. So we're going to close with an affirmation. So remember, the homework is to use one or all of the kinds of strategies that we've mentioned here today. Janelle is checking our agenda to make sure we haven't left anything off. And remember, if you have other final thoughts or questions, get them in before we close. But our affirmation for this week is that I am able to play a positive role in someone's life today, right? And so let that be one of your mantras, one of your affirmations in the morning, is that I have the ability to have a positive role in someone else's life today, right? And that's, even if you have multiple oppressions, right? You can still play a positive role in someone's life today. I Digress says, Lord has some good stuff on that too.
Might be a person.
Yeah, Audrey Lorde. I'm assuming you mean Audrey Lorde. So for those of you who don't know, Lorde, probably most likely Audrey Lorde in that sense, is a great resource for a lot of information. And I know she has an essay specifically about how Black women can heal as, you know, a sisterhood as well. Any other final thoughts or questions, Dr. Crutchfield? Because they'll see me again next week. But I want you to, you know, say as much as you can while you have the floor.
Yeah, I don't know. I just, you know, I think it's important to get involved in dismantling whatever these systems are, particularly if you have the privilege. And so, you know, not just growing up, but, you know, as an adult, even I've made a decision to put a lot of my career into fighting this, you know, sparked from the experiences that my sister and brother and I have had growing up and realizing what that system is. And so any way that you can help, even if it's dedicating a whole stream of a portion of your work. And for me, that's my research into, you know, dismantling the things that you see as unjust. I encourage you to do so and to, you know, make the difference that you can, like the affirmation says today.
Absolutely. I Digress is giving us additional tips. Allies with money, with moolah, can support bail funds, not just during the protests, like Black Mamas Bailout Funds, Black Mamas Bailout Funds. So that's not just about people who are going to prison for protesting, but it's about the systemic injustice that vastly disproportionately puts Black mothers, especially dark-skinned women, and Black men in prisons, right? So even beyond like events related to protesting, you can still be paying attention to police brutality and bailout funds and the disparities in policing and that kind of thing.
Right. And so they wanted you to repeat the affirmation.
Oh, repeat the affirmation. I have the ability to make a positive difference in someone's life today. I think my wording was a little different, but that's the theme. Thank you, Jamie. So reclamation of self, Jamie Self. And Priscilla says, thank you, guys. Well, thank you all. I'm going to miss having a co-host next week.
I know. It's been great. I'm totally honored, and I'm continuing the work, so hopefully you guys do too.
Yes. And so if you're interested in what I'll be talking about in the coming weeks, I do have some posts on Instagram and Facebook with the schedule through July of topics. I think the next week might be racism versus colorism, which is a big one. So yeah, y'all want to tune in for that. Love you all. Bye.